They picked a fight with the wrong mailbox 5 times in 2 months. Those HOA wannabe cops, strutting around in their fake badges and toy patrol SUV, smashed my mailboxes to bits, thinking they could bully our Texas neighborhood into submission. Every Tuesday at 7 a.m., they'd roll by, lights flashing, targeting anyone who dared vote against their rules. But when they obliterated my 5th mailbox, cackling like villains in a bad movie, they pushed me too far. I'm Lee, and what I built next wasn't just a replacement, it was a legend. A fortress so unbreakable, it sent their precious SUV to the scrapyard and landed Marcia Biggs in court. That Tuesday morning, I stood over the mangled remains of my mailbox, coffee mug in hand, staring at the wreckage. It wasn't just broken, it was annihilated, post snapped in half. Metal box flattened like a pancake under a sledgehammer. Tire tracks carved a brazen path from the road to my mailbox's grave and back. This was the 3rd attack in 6 weeks, and the pattern was chilling. My first mailbox stood proud for 2 years. No trouble. Then, 6 weeks ago, I found it bent at a 90-degree angle on a Tuesday morning. I chalked it up to a drunk driver, swapped it for a standard postal-approved box from the hardware store. 4 weeks ago, another Tuesday, mailbox number 2 was ripped from its sturdy oak post, thick as my wristband, left for dead in the ditch. Which city of the United States are you watching from? Drop a comment and share with us if you have any confrontation with the HOA. Will narrate your story on our channel, A Twig. That's when I started to suspect this wasn't random, but mailbox number 3 confirmed it. The destruction was methodical, complete, and timed with military precision. Every incident happened on a Tuesday morning, between 6 o'clock and 7 a.m., right before I usually headed out to check the ranch fences. Someone was watching my routine, timing their attacks when they knew I'd be inside, finishing breakfast. My neighbor, Hank, ambled over his own coffee, steaming in the cool morning air. He was a good man, retired electrician who'd lived in the neighborhood for 20 years. Let me guess, he said, surveying the damage with a knowing look. Tuesday morning again. I nodded, still staring at the wreckage. That's when the HOA patrol does their rounds, he continued. And the way he said patrol made it sound like he was describing something out of a bad cop movie. I turned to face him fully. HOA patrol? What are you talking about, Hank? He took a long sip of coffee before answering like he was gathering courage. Oh, you haven't met our self-appointed cops yet, Marcia Biggs and her crew. They've got an SUV with flashing amber lights, fake badges, the whole deal. They patrol every Tuesday and Thursday at 7 a.m. sharp. The pieces started falling into place in my mind like dominoes. Marcia Biggs. I'd heard the name at the last HOA meeting. She was the president, a woman in her 50s who dressed like she was heading to a corporate board meeting just to inspect people's lawns. I'd voted against her proposal to mandate specific grass heights and find anyone whose lawn exceeded 3 in it had. Seemed ridiculous at the time, but now I was beginning to understand that Marcia didn't handle opposition well. They actually pretend to be cops? I asked, incredulous. Hank laughed, but there was no humor in it. Oh, it's worse than that. They've got a whole setup modified SUV labeled HOA Patrol Unit. License plate reads Rule 1. Marcia wears a vest with HOA enforcement printed on the back, carries a citation pad and measuring tape like their weapons. I've seen her pull people over in the neighborhood to issue warnings about their garbage can placement. He paused, looking at my destroyed mailbox. Again, everyone who voted against Marcia's new regulations. Their mailboxes keep having accidents. You're victim number 7 this month. Cal. The anger that had been simmering in my gut suddenly crystallized into cold determination. In the military, we had a saying once: is happenstance, twice is coincidence, 3 times is enemy action. This was definitely enemy action. She's destroying federal property. Because people disagreed with her, I asked, though I already knew the answer. Hank nodded grimly. Been going on for about 18 months now. Started small, just mysterious damage here and there, but lately she's gotten bolder. The fake cop routine started. About 6 months ago now, she's got 2 lieutenants who ride along with her. I spent the rest of that morning cleaning up the debris and thinking, in my 42 years, I dealt with bullies in many forms. In high school, in the army, even in business, but someone using fake authority to terrorize a neighborhood that was a new low. The worst part was the calculated nature of it. This wasn't random vandalism or even simple revenge. This was psychological warfare designed to make people fall in line. Through fear and frustration, Marcia was betting that most people would rather comply than keep replacing mailboxes. She was probably right about most people, but she'd made a critical error in targeting me. I wasn't most people. I was a retired military engineer who'd spent years designing defensive structures in hostile territories. And I was about to show Marcia Biggs what happened when you declared war on the wrong veteran. 3 strikes in baseball. You're out in Texas. You fight back. The first thing you learn in military intelligence is that emotion clouds judgment. So I spent the next 3 days planning my response with the same methodical approach I'd used to design forward operating bases in Afghanistan. I couldn't just rebuild and wait for another attack. I needed evidence, undeniable proof that would expose Marcia's operation for what it really was. I invested in a surveillance system that would make a casino jealous. 1 camera hidden in a decorative rock near the mailbox, another concealed in a birdhouse across the street with a clear view of the road, and a third mounted high in a tree, camouflaged among the branches. Each camera was motion-activated, night vision capable, and uploaded directly to cloud storage. If someone so much as slowed down near my property, I'd have multiple angles of footage. I rebuilt mailbox number 4 over the weekend, making it deliberately conspicuous, bright, reflective numbers. A red flag that practically screamed for attention, and I even added a small American flag on top for good measure if Marcia wanted a target. I'd give her one. She couldn't resist. The waiting was the hardest part. Sunday passed without incident. Monday evening, I found myself checking the camera feeds every hour, like a fisherman watching his lines. Then Tuesday morning arrived, and with it the distant sound of an engine with an unusually aggressive exhaust note. I positioned myself at the kitchen window with a clear view of the road, coffee mug in hand, playing the part of the unsuspecting rancher. At exactly 7:03 a.m., the HOA patrol SUV came into view, and I had to blink twice to believe what I was seeing. Hank hadn't exaggerated. If anything, he'd understated the absurdity of it. The white SUV had amber flashing lights mounted on the roof, magnetic signs on the doors reading HOA Patrol Unit in bold letters, and a spotlight mounted on the driver's side. Through my binoculars, I could see Marcia behind the wheel wearing aviator sunglasses. Despite the early morning gloom, and what looked like a plastic badge pinned to her chest. Her passenger, a thin man I recognized as Wallace from the HOA board, held a clipboard and appeared to be calling out addresses as they drove. They rolled past my mailbox at normal speed, and for a moment I thought maybe they'd skip me this time. Then I saw the brake lights. The SUV stopped about 50 yards past my driveway, reversed slowly, and I watched Marcia point at my mailbox while saying something to Wallace. Even from this distance, I could see her smile, the predatory grin of someone about to enjoy themselves at another's expense. The SUV accelerated backward, then shifted into drive. Marcia cranked the wheel hard right and floored it. The vehicle lurched forward, tires squealing, and slammed into my mailbox at approximately 35 miles per hour. The impact was tremendous. The mailbox exploded like it had been hit by a wrecking ball, pieces flying in every direction. Through the binoculars, I saw Marcia Wallace while laughing. The SUV's amber lights continued flashing as they drove away like some perverse victory lap. I waited until they were out of sight before checking the cameras. The footage was even better than I'd hoped. Crystal clear video from 3 angles, showing the deliberate approach, the acceleration, the impact, and most importantly, Marcia's face through the windshield, clearly visible and clearly enjoying herself. The license plate, the HOA patrol markings, even Wallace filming. The destruction on his phone, all captured in high definition. That evening's HOA meeting was held in the community center, a beige building that smelled of coffee and broken dreams. I arrived early with my laptop and cables, setting up the projector. While the room slowly filled, Marcia entered, last, flanked by Wallace and another board member, all 3 wearing matching HOA enforcement vests over their regular clothes. She took her position at the head table, gavel in hand, fake badge gleaming. Under the fluorescent lights, the meeting proceeded with typical bureaucratic tedium until we reached new business. I raised my hand. Marcia's eyes narrowed slightly, but she acknowledged me with regal condescension. Yes, Mr. Dawson, do you have something to contribute? I stood, remote in hand. I'd like to address the issue of vandalism in our neighborhood, specifically the deliberate destruction of mailboxes. The room stirred with interest. Several neighbors exchanged knowing looks. Marcia's smile was razor thin. I'm not aware of any vandalism issues. Do you have evidence to present? As a matter of fact, I do. I clicked the remote, and the first video began playing on the screen behind her. The room went dead silent as they watched the HOA patrol SUV deliberately destroy my mailbox. When Marcia's laughing face filled the screen, someone gasped. The video ended, and I clicked to the next one, a different angle showing Wallace filming the destruction, then the third angle capturing the license plate and the magnetic HOA patrol signs. When the footage finished, you could have heard a pin drop. Marcia stood slowly, adjusting her fake badge with the practiced motion of someone trying to project authority. While their world crumbled, our patrol vehicle may have swerved to avoid an animal. These accusations are baseless and frankly slanderous. Wallace chimed in with rehearsed precision. The HOA patrol provides essential community surveillance. Accidents happen during the course of protecting neighborhood values. It was such obvious nonsense that several people actually laughed. Marcia gabbled for order, her face flushing red. Motion to table this discussion, pending review by the board's legal committee. All in favor. Her 2 cronies raised their hands immediately. Motion carried. Meeting adjourned. She gave again and swept from the room her enforcement vest flapping behind her like a cape. The next morning, I found a citation tucked under my windshield wiper. It was written on a pad designed to look official, complete with fake statute numbers and legal-sounding language. Violation Notice HOA Patrol. Division Mailbox creates visibility hazard for patrol vehicles. Remove within 48 hours or face daily fines of $100. Signed, Chief M. Bigby, GSHOA Enforcement Division. I studied the citation, noting the effort that had gone into making it look legitimate. The paper was even watermarked. This wasn't just petty tyranny. This was a carefully constructed delusion of authority. Marcia didn't just want to control the neighborhood. She wanted to be the law. Well, she wanted to play cops. Time to show her what happens when you mess with federal property. Word count 1,152. Thursday morning came with the kind of crisp Texas air that makes you grateful to be alive. Though I suspected Marcia Biggs was about to have a very different experience. I'd spent Wednesday constructing mailbox number 5. But this wasn't just any mailbox. This was bait, designed with the same attention to detail I'd once used for military intelligence operations. The post was deliberately wobbly, the box itself mounted at a slight angle that screamed, easy target, and I'd even used cheaper materials that would provide a satisfying crunch upon impact. But hidden within this seemingly vulnerable structure was my real weapon, a 360 camera system with motion sensors and audio recording capability. If Marcia wanted to play cop, I'd give her the full surveillance state experience. The genius was in the details. I'd added a small sign reading, "Smile, you're on federal property camera," which was technically true, but small enough that someone driving by at patrol speed might miss it. The cameras themselves were military grade, the kind that could read a license plate from 200 yards in complete darkness. I also installed a radio scanner in my kitchen, tuned to the frequency Marcia and her crew used for their official communications. It had taken some work to find their channel. They were using spot walkie-talkies set to what they probably thought was a secure frequency. The arrogance of it all still amazes me. They were so convinced of their authority that they never considered someone might be listening. Thursday morning arrived on schedule, and I positioned myself in the workshop where I could monitor everything without being seen. At 6:55 a.m. the scanner crackled to life with Marcia's voice, tiny but unmistakable. Unit 1 to all patrol units, beginning Thursday morning sector sweep. Remember, we're looking for violations of sections 12 through 15 of the Neighborhood Covenant. Wallace's voice responded, "Copy that, Chief, rolling out now." A third voice I didn't recognize added Unit 3 in position. "The streets will be safe on our watch, Chief." The delusion was so complete it would have been funny if it weren't so destructive. These people had created an entire fantasy world where they were the thin blue line between order and chaos in a suburban neighborhood, where the biggest crime was usually someone forgetting to bring in their garbage cans at 7 o'clock a.m. sharp. The scanner came alive again. Unit 1, approaching the target. "I mean Dawson property," Marcia said, and I could hear the excitement in her voice. Wallace responded, "Copy that, Chief. The insurgent has rebuilt mailbox, is in violation of aesthetic guidelines." Marcia's laugh crackled through the speaker. "Time to show him who patrols this neighborhood. All units, this is a Code 3 response." I had to shake my head. Code 3, they'd even invented their own response codes. Through the window, I watched the SUV approach with full theatrical flair, amber lights flashing spotlights sweeping back and forth despite the morning sun. Even what sounded like a siren app playing from someone's phone. They passed the mailbox at crawl speed, then stopped about 30 yards down the road. The SUV reversed, slowly lining up for the perfect angle of attack. Through my binoculars, I could see all three of them in the vehicle, now Marcia driving, Wallace riding shotgun with his phone out, recording, and a younger man in the back seat, wearing what looked like a tactical vest over a polo shirt. The level of roleplay was simultaneously pathetic and disturbing. These weren't teenagers playing cops and robbers. These were grown adults who'd convinced themselves that their HOA positions gave them law enforcement authority. The SUV's engine revved a battle cry in the quiet morning. Marcia accelerated hard, the vehicle lurching forward with surprising speed for something that size. At 35 miles per hour, she cranked the wheel right and aimed directly for my mailbox. The impact was everything they'd hoped for. The mailbox exploded in a shower of wood splinters and twisted metal, the post snapping with a satisfying crack. The SUV's amber lights continued flashing as it skidded to a stop, and I could hear whooping and cheering from inside through the scanner. Their conversation was even more damning. "Direct hit, Chief. Target neutralized," the younger man shouted. "Outstanding work, Unit 3, Marcia replied, breathing hard from adrenaline. "The insurgent will learn that nobody challenges HOA authority in this sector." Wallace added, "Got it all on video, Chief." Another successful patrol. They drove off slowly, amber lights still flashing, probably feeling like they'd just taken down a dangerous criminal instead of destroying a mailbox. I spent the rest of the morning reviewing the footage, and it was even better than I had hoped. The high-definition cameras had captured everything in exquisite detail, not just the impact but Marcia's face through the windshield, eyes wide with manic glee, mouth open in a triumphant shout. Wallace filming on his phone while wearing his fake badge, the third officer in the back seat pumping his fist like he just scored a touchdown. But the audio was the real gold, every word of their delusional radio chatter, their celebration of the destruction, their references to me as the insurgent. And the target, it was a complete record of intentional, premeditated destruction of federal property while pretending to be law enforcement. That afternoon, I did some research that revealed the full scope of Marcia's reign of terror by HOA meeting minutes with social media posts about mailbox vandalism. I discovered she'd been running this operation for 18 months, 23 mailboxes destroyed, always belonging to people who'd voted against her proposals or questioned her authority. The pattern was consistent destruction, followed by citations, followed by fines, followed by compliance. Most people just gave in rather than fight the system. But what really caught my attention was the financial angle. The HOA's budget showed regular expenditures for patrol vehicle maintenance that mysteriously spiked after each spate of mailbox destructions. She was using HOA funds to repair damage to the SUV caused by her vigilante campaign. I also discovered that Marcia had given herself and her crew official-sounding titles. She was Chief of HOA Enforcement, Wallace was Lieutenant of Compliance, and the younger man was Sergeant of Community Standards. They'd even created ID cards and badges ordered from some online company that probably thought they were making props for a community theater, the badges said. HOA Enforcement Division, around a generic star logo with their fake titles and ID number. The level of detail was obsessive, the product of someone who'd watched too many cop shows and decided to create their own little police state. But here's the thing, about playing pretend. Eventually, reality has a way of crashing the party, and I was about to introduce Marcia to a reality she never saw coming. Mailbox number 6 wouldn't be a mailbox, it would be a monument to karma. Military engineering taught me that the best defense is one your enemy never sees coming, wrapped in something they think they understand. So when I started building mailbox number 6, I made sure the neighbors saw exactly what they expected to see: a frustrated rancher putting up yet another mailbox. What they didn't see were the 20 years of experience designing defensive structures in places where failure meant casualty. I started with a trip to Henderson Steel Supply on the outskirts of town, where Big Mike Henderson himself helped me load the materials. 18 steel pipe, he asked, eyebrows raised. Cow, you building a mailbox or a bomb shelter? I smiled and told him about my HOA troubles. His expression darkened immediately. Marcia Biggs, that woman cited me for having the wrong shade of white on my business truck. When I did a house call in your neighborhood, load up whatever you need, and I'll throw in some extra rebar, just because. I can't stand bullies with clipboards. The construction began on a Friday afternoon, deliberately timed so the HOA patrol would have the entire weekend to observe and document my activities. I started by digging a hole that would have made my old drill sergeant proud. 5 feet deep, 3 feet wide, the kind of foundation that could support a guard tower. As I worked, I noticed curtains twitching in windows up and down the street. Good. I wanted witnesses. I wanted Marca to know exactly what I was building, or at least what she thought I was building. The steel pipe went in first, a massive 8-in diameter tube that Big Mike had called thick as a fence post, strong as a tank trap. I told the camera it could stop a tank, and that wasn't hyperbole. This particular steel was rated for industrial applications, the kind they use for oil, dirks, and bridge supports. Saturday morning brought the concrete work, and with it my first official HOA surveillance. The patrol SUV crawled by at 7:00 a.m. sharp, amber lights flashing despite the broad daylight through the kitchen window. I watched Marcia in the passenger seat, this time frantically taking photos with what looked like a professional camera fitted with a telephoto lens. The driver, Wallace, based on the thin profile, slowed to a near stop directly in front of my property. I gave them a friendly wave with my concrete-covered glove, which apparently warranted several more photos. They completed 2 more passes that morning each time, documenting my progress, like archaeologists recording a dig site. Perfect. Let them think they were gathering evidence. With a rebar cage that looked like abstract art before the gray sludge covered it, I'd calculated the load requirements based on a vehicle impact at 50 miles per hour, then doubled it for safety. As the concrete flowed around the steel pipe, I thought about all the defensive positions I'd constructed over the years. This one wouldn't protect soldiers from incoming fire, but it would serve justice in its own way. By noon, I had an audience. Neighbors found excuses to walk by, some offering encouragement, others just curious about what looked like massive overkill for a simple mailbox. Deborah, our mail carrier, stopped her truck and walked over, shaking her head at the construction. Cal, I've delivered mail for 23 years, through hurricanes and hail storms, but I've never seen anything like what's been happening on this route, she said, studying the massive foundation. Those fake cops have made my job a nightmare. And cardboard boxes, it's not right. She paused, then added, quietly build it. Strong, some of us are rooting for you. Her words carried weight. Deborah had been delivering mail since before Marcia's reign of terror began. She'd seen the neighborhood change, watched fear creep in where friendliness used to live. It'll be the strongest mailbox in Texas, I promised. She smiled, a real smile that crinkled the corners of her eyes. Make it stronger, after what I've seen those pretend police do. Make it invincible. Sunday brought the final phase of construction. The mailbox itself was my masterpiece, repurposed from military-grade steel plating that had once been part of an armored vehicle. I'd acquired it legally from a surplus auction years ago, thinking it might make an interesting project someday. That day had come. I welded it together with the same precision I'd once used on critical infrastructure. Door dimensions, everything by the book. But while it looked like a standard black mailbox from the outside, it was essentially a safe on a stick. In place throughout Sunday, the HOA patrol made regular appearances. At one point they stopped, and Marca herself stepped out in full uniform. Weapon, she marched over to where I was applying the final coat of regulation black paint. Mr. Dawson, she announced in what she probably thought was an authoritative voice, I'm conducting an official inspection of this structure for code compliance. I straightened up, paintbrush in hand, and gave her my best military bearing. Ma'am, this mailbox meets all federal postal regulations. USPS requirement, highlighted and annotated. She glanced at them, clearly not expecting actual documentation. This is about HOA aesthetic guidelines. This monstrosity is clearly intended to intimidate and disturb the visual harmony of our neighborhood. I kept my expression neutral, a skill honed by years of dealing with superior officers who'd lost touch with reality. On this street, the only difference is the structural integrity. She scribbled furiously on her clipboard, muttering about aggressive architecture and implicit threats to patrol safety. As she turned to leave, she delivered what she clearly thought was a parting shot. If this violates any state codes, you'll remove it at your own expense. The HOA legal team will be reviewing this thoroughly. That evening, Hank wandered over with 2 beers and a grin. Cal, that's not a mailbox, he said, handing me a cold one. That's a monument to every person who's ever been pushed too far by a petty tyrant. We stood there, admiring the Sentinel. That's what I'd started calling it in my head, as the sun set behind it. You know she's going to hit it, right? Hank asked. She can't help herself. It's like putting a red cape in front of a bull. I took a long pull from the beer and nodded. I'm counting on it. See, Hank, bullies like Marcia operate on a simple principle. They keep pushing because nobody pushes back. She's destroyed 23 mailboxes because 23 people tried to play by the rules. She kept changing. I pointed to the Sentinel. That's what happens when you change the game entirely. As if on cue, the HOA patrol SUV made one last pass. No lights this time, just slow and predatory. Through the growing darkness, I could see Marcia in the passenger seat, staring at the Sentinel like it was a personal insult, which I suppose it was. Everything about it challenged her authority. Mere existence declared that someone wasn't afraid of her anymore. The trap is set. I told Hank, now all I need is one more Tuesday morning. He clinked his beer against mine. To justice, he said to karma. I replied. The Sentinel stood silent in the gathering darkness, waiting patiently for its moment of truth. Tuesday morning arrived with the kind of crisp clarity that makes you believe in cosmic justice. I'd been up since 5, not from nerves, but from anticipation. 20 years of military service had taught me that the waiting before action was always the hardest part. But this morning felt different. This morning karma had an appointment with Marcia Biggs, and I had front row seat. I positioned myself in the garden with my usual coffee, wearing my old unit cap from the Army Corps of Engineers, a detail I knew Marcia would notice and interpret as provocation. The morning dew still clung to the grass, and somewhere in the distance a mockingbird was running through its repertoire. It was the kind of peaceful morning that deserved to stay peaceful. But I knew what was coming at 6:55 a.m. The radio scanner in my kitchen window crackled to life. I'd positioned it perfectly so I could hear every word while appearing to tend my tomato plants. Marcia's voice cut through the static with military precision. If military precision came from someone who'd learned everything they knew from bad action movies, all units, this is Chief Operation Mailbox. Freedom is a go, I repeat. Wallace's response came immediately. Roger, Chief Unit 2, in position, target acquired. The terrorist has built a fortress. The fact that they were calling me a terrorist for building a regulation. Mailbox told me everything about their mindset. In their fantasy world, anyone who didn't bow to their authority was an enemy combatant. Unit 3, standing by, came the younger voice, practically vibrating with excitement. Chief, recommend we approach at ramming speed, show maximum force. Marcia's reply sent chills down my spine, not from fear, but from the sheer delusion it represented. Authorized. This ends today. Nobody builds unauthorized structures in our patrol zone. Ram speed authorized. Show him who runs this neighborhood. I took a sip of coffee and checked my watch. 7 a.m. Exactly right on schedule. The distant sound of an over-eved engine grew louder, accompanied by the electronic. Their commitment to the fantasy amber lights flashing in seizure-inducing patterns, spotlights sweeping back and forth despite the morning sun, and this was new. Some kind of air horn blasting what they probably thought sounded official through my peripheral vision. I watched the SUV slow as it approached the sentinel inside. I could see Marcia had gone all out for this special occasion. She wore what looked like a full tactical vest, aviator, sunglasses, and her fake badge was now accompanied by what appeared to be combination ribbons, probably ordered from the same costume website. Wallace had his phone mounted to the dashboard, recording everything while the third officer was leaning out the back window with his own phone, shouting something about documenting the takedown. They passed the sentinel at crawl speed, like a predator sizing up prey. Then the brake lights flared, and the SUV stopped about 100 yards down the road. Through the scanner, their tactical discussion was pure comedy gold. Chief, target is larger than previous encounters. Recommend maximum velocity for penetration. That was the younger voice, trying to sound professional. Noted. Unit 3, Wallace. Are you recording? Marcia asked. Affirmative, Chief. Multiple angles. This will be one for the training videos. Training videos. They were making training videos of destroying mailboxes. The delusion ran deeper than I'd imagined. All units, this is it. The insurgent thinks he can defy HOA authority with his illegal fortification. Time to show him the full power of neighborhood enforcement. Prepare for ramming speed. The SUV's engine roared as Marcia shifted into reverse, backing up to get maximum running distance. Through the binoculars I'd hidden among my gardening tools, I could see her face, jaw set, eyes focused, looking like she was about to charge into battle rather than commit federal property destruction. The backup lights went off a pause, then the engine screamed as she floored it. The SUV lurched forward, tires smoking slightly from the aggressive acceleration, 30 miles per hour, 354045. She was coming in faster than ever before, probably figuring that the Sentinel's obvious strength required maximum force. Time seemed to slow as the SUV bore down on my mailbox. I saw Marcia's face through the windshield, teeth bared in what could only be described as a war cry, hands gripping the wheel with white-knuckled intensity. Wallace had his phone up, narrating the approach. The third officer was now fully hanging out the window, whooping like they were at a rodeo at the last second. Marcia cranked the wheel, right, aiming the SUV's reinforced brush guard directly at the Sentinel's post. The impact was everything I'd hoped for, and more. ARANG. The sound was like God's own hammer hitting an anvil. The SUV's front end met 8 in of steel pipe, backed by 5 feet of reinforced concrete, and physics took over with brutal efficiency. The hood crumpled, instantly folding up like an accordion. Both airbags detonated, with sharp bangs filling the cabin with white powder. The engine block, meeting an immovable object, decided to relocate. Itself, about 18 in backward beam, erupted from the ruptured radiator in a white geyser. The amber lights shattered and died. The fake siren made a sound like a dying whale before cutting out completely. Through it all, the Sentinel stood perfectly straight. Not a scratch on its black surface, not even a slight lean to suggest it had been hit by a 3-ton vehicle at 45 miles per hour. For a moment there was silence, except for the hiss of steam and the tick of cooling metal. Then the driver's door opened and Marcia stumbled out. Her tactical vest was covered in airbag powder, making her look like she'd been hit with a flower bomb. Her aviator sunglasses hung from one ear. Her fake badge dangled sideways, and several of her costume combination ribbons had come unpinned and were stuck to her vest at odd angles. Blood trickled from her nose where the airbag had made contact. "Assault," she screamed, her voice cracking. "This is assault on HOA officers. Call 911. Tell them an officer is down. Officer down." Wallace crawled out the passenger's side, equally disheveled, still clutching his phone, which was somehow still recording. "Chief, we're not real cops," he said dazedly. "Shut up," Marcia screeched. "This is attempted murder. He built a trap, a deadly trap." By now, neighbors were pouring out of their houses. Someone was already live streaming. I could hear them narrating. "Yo, the fake cops just got wrecked by a mailbox. Hashtag mailbox. Cops. Hashtag caramel police. Sentinel stand. This is insane." More phones appeared, everyone documenting Marcia's meltdown. She spun in circles, alternating between screaming about assault and demanding, "Someone arrest me." The third officer had climbed out the back, taking one look at the situation, and was quietly trying to edge away from the scene. Hank appeared at my elbow, coffee mug in hand, trying not to smile too broadly. "Well, Cal, I'd say that went about as expected." I nodded, maintaining my calm demeanor. "Yep, though I didn't expect the airbags to coat her quite that thoroughly." Within 10 minutes, a real sheriff's cruiser arrived. Sheriff Thompson stepped out, took in the scene, the destroyed SUV, the Sentinel standing unmarked, Marcia still ranting about attempted murder, and I saw him physically suppress a laugh. He walked over to me. "First morning, Cal. Want to tell me what happened here?" "Morning, Sheriff. I was tending my garden when Mrs. Biggs drove her vehicle into my mailbox at approximately 45 miles per hour. I have multiple angles of security footage if you'd like to review them." He nodded, then walked over to examine the sentinel, running his hand along the post with professional interest. "This is quite a mailbox, cow. Mind if I measure it?" "Not at all. You'll find it meets all federal postal regulations to the letter." As he measured, Marcia stomped over, still covered in airbag residue. "Sheriff Thompson, I demand you arrest this man immediately. He built an illegal trap designed to destroy HOA patrol vehicles." The sheriff straightened up, folding his measuring tape. "Ma'am, first off, impersonating law enforcement is a crime. Second, destroying federal property is a crime. Third, filing false reports is a crime. But hitting a legal mailbox with your vehicle—" He paused, looking at the destroyed SUV, then back at Marcia. "That's just stupid." The crowd laughed. Someone started a slow clap. Marcia's face went through several shades of red before settling on purple. "Legal mailbox, one vehicle accident. That's all I see here," the sheriff announced to the crowd. "Though I will need to have a word with Mrs. Biggs about this whole HOA officers situation." The emergency HOA meeting was called for that very evening, and the community center had never been so packed. People were standing along the walls, sitting in the aisles, and crowding near the doors. The destruction of Marcia's SUV had gone viral by lunchtime. Someone had edited together multiple phone videos with the Benny Hill theme music, and it already had 2 million views. But this wasn't about internet fame. This was about a community finally ready to confront the tyrant who terrorized them for 18 months. Marcia sat at the head table, looking like she'd been through a war, neck brace, arm sling, black eyes swelling shut, and still wearing her chief badge pinned to her sling. Wallace sat beside her, a bandage across his nose, while their third accomplice was notably absent. Word was he'd resigned from the HOA board via email that afternoon and was considering moving. Marcia called the meeting to order with her one good arm struggling with the gavel. "Before we begin," she said, her voice from screaming, "I want to address the vicious attack that occurred this morning. I was conducting a routine HOA patrol when I was viciously attacked by a trap disguised as a mailbox." I stood up, laptop already connected to the projector. "Point of order, Madam President. I have evidence relevant to this discussion." She glared at me with her one good eye. "You're out of order. You can't speak unless recognized by the chair." "Actually," said Linda Chen, the HOA secretary, who'd been quietly taking notes for 3 years according to Robert's Rules of Order, "any member can raise a point of order at any time. Please proceed, Mr. Dawson." I clicked to the first slide titled, "Simply Evidence of HOA Patrol Crimes." A murmur ran through the crowd. "What you're about to see," I said, keeping my voice calm and professional, "is 18 months of systematic destruction of federal property, impersonation of law enforcement, and abuse of HOA authority." The first video began playing a compilation I'd spent the afternoon creating from security footage obtained from neighbors who'd reached out after the morning's incident. 23 mailbox destructions, edited together in chronological order. Each one showed the same pattern: the HOA patrol SUV approaching, accelerating, destroying the mailbox, then driving away with lights flashing. Marcia was clearly visible in most of them, wearing her fake badge and tactical vest. The room was dead silent, except for the sound of destruction playing over and over. "But that's not all," I continued, clicking to the next slide. "Here's the audio from this morning's attack, recorded from their own radio communications." Marcia's voice filled the room. All units, this is Chief Operation. Mailbox freedom is a go. Then Wallace, the terrorist, has built a fortress. Then Marcia again ram-spied. Authorized show him who runs this neighborhood. Several people gasped. Someone in the back shouted she called him a terrorist for building a mailbox. I moved to the next evidence, the paper trail. Every single person whose mailbox was destroyed received an HOA violation within 48 hours. Here are the citations, all signed by Mrs. Biggs, all citing made-up statute numbers, all threatening fines. The screen showed dozens of fake citations, each more official looking than the last. All complete nonsense. Furthermore, I added HOA financial records. Show regular payments for patrol vehicle maintenance that correspond exactly with mailbox destruction. Dates our HOA dues were being used to repair the damage caused by these attacks. The crowd's murmur turned into an angry rumble. People were standing up, waving their own citations, sharing their stories. Betty Morrison, 73 years old and widowed, stood on shaking legs 6 times, she said, her voice cracking with emotion. You destroyed my mailbox 6 times. My husband built that first one with his own hands before he passed. It was the last thing he ever made, and you destroyed it because I voted against your stupid fence height proposal, and you had the nerve, the absolute nerve, to show up at his funeral wearing that fake badge. The dam broke one after another. Neighbors stood to share their experiences. A young couple revealed they'd spent $2,000 on security systems, thinking they had vandals. A single mother talked about her children being afraid to check the mail. A local business owner explained how Marcia had threatened to have the home shut down, his home accounting practice, if he didn't vote her way. Each story was worse than the last, painting a picture of a reign of terror that went far beyond destroyed mailboxes. Through it all, Marcia sat at the head table, her face cycling through expressions of outrage, disbelief, and finally something approaching fear. This wasn't going according to her script. In her fantasy world, she was the hero protecting the neighborhood. The cognitive dissonance of being seen as the villain was visibly breaking her. I did it for property values, she suddenly shouted, standing up so fast her chair fell over. This neighborhood was falling apart. Grass, 2 long fences, the wrong color mailboxes that didn't match. I brought order, I brought standards, I brought law. You brought fear, said Tom, a Vietnam veteran who lived 3 houses down from me. I've seen what happens when people get a little power and no oversight. It ain't pretty, and it ain't American. Motion to remove Marcia Biggs from the HOA board, Linda Chen said quietly, and to dissolve the so-called HOA patrol permanently. Second came from at least a dozen voices, simultaneously, all in favor. Linda asked. A forest of hands shot up. I did a quick count. At least 51 opposed. Marcia raised her good hand. Wallace hesitated, then slowly raised his. Flow. One other person in the back raised theirs, then quickly lowered it when they realized they were surrounded. Motion carries. Linda announced. Mrs. Biggs, you are hereby removed from all HOA positions, effective immediately. Please surrender any HOA property in your possession, including. She paused, a small smile playing at her lips. Any badges, real or imaginary. Marcia stood there, swaying slightly, looking around the room as if seeing it for the first time. You don't understand, she said, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. Without me, without HOA, the patrol property values will plummet, crime will run rampant, the neighborhood will descend into chaos. You'll beg for the HOA patrol to return. You'll see, you'll all see. She reached up with her good hand and unpinned her chief badge, staring at it like it was a loved one. Then she threw it on the table and stormed out, or tried to. It's hard to storm dramatically when you're wearing a neck brace and can only use one arm. Wallace followed her, pausing at the door. For what it's worth, he said to the room, I'm sorry, it started as a neighborhood watch. I don't know when it became this. Then he was gone, to leaving behind a room full of neighbors who looked like they'd just woken from a collective nightmare. So what happens now? Someone asked. Linda Chen stood up, looking more confident than I'd ever seen her. Now we rebuild. Not just mailboxes, but trust first order of business. I motion that we reimburse everyone whose mailbox was destroyed by the former patrol. Second. All in favor. This time, the vote was unanimous. As the meeting broke up, people kept coming over to shake my hand, pat my back, and share their relief, but I wasn't interested in being anyone's hero. I just wanted to tend my ranch and get my mail in peace. The morning after the HOA meeting, I woke to find 17 messages on my phone and 3 news vans parked outside my ranch. The video compilation of Marcia versus the Sentinel had exploded overnight. 2 million views, and climbing. Fake HOA cops crash into karma ran on every major news outlet, complete with expert commentary on the rise of HOA overreach. Legal experts weighed in on the various crimes Marcia had committed: destruction of federal property 23 times over, impersonation of law enforcement, fraud, misuse of HOA funds. The district attorney's office announced they were reviewing the case. A postal inspector called to personally thank me for defending the sanctity of mail delivery, and informed me that Marcia was facing federal charges. Each destroyed mailbox counted as a separate felony. 3 days later, the legal consequences began falling like dominoes. Marcia was arrested at her home, and someone filmed her being led away in actual handcuffs while shouting about her rights as an HOA chief. The irony of real cops arresting a fake cop wasn't lost on anyone. Wallace cut a deal, immediately agreeing to testify about the entire operation in exchange for reduced charges. He revealed that Marcia had kept detailed records of every mailbox destruction, complete with photos and what she called tactical assessments. The plea deal was announced 2 weeks later. Marcia Biggs pleaded guilty to multiple counts of destruction of federal property, impersonation of law enforcement, and fraud. Her sentence: 500 hours of community service to be served, specifically maintaining and repairing mailboxes at post offices across the county. 3 years probation and a lifetime ban from serving on any HOA board. The changes in the neighborhood were immediate and profound. The new HOA board, led by Linda Chen, held their first meeting with a simple agenda: roll back every arbitrary rule Marcia had implemented. The HOA Patrol SUV was sold, with the proceeds going to reimburse victims. The fake badges and tactical vests were donated to a community theater company. As for the Sentinel itself, it became something none of us expected: a tourist attraction. Google Maps officially added it as a landmark, the indestructible mailbox site of the great HOA uprising of 2024. People drove from neighboring states to take selfies with it. Deborah, our mail carrier, started decorating it for holidays. She told me she saluted it every morning, out of respect for what it represents. A year later, I was sitting on my porch with morning coffee when new neighbors moved into Marcia's former house. She'd left town 6 months into her community service, transferring to a post office 3 counties away. The young couple walked over to introduce themselves. "Is it true?" the husband asked about the HOA cops in the mailbox. I smiled and pulled out my phone. Every word. Want to see the video? We watched the compilation. Marcia and her fake uniform, the radio chatter about terrorists, the spectacular crash, her powder-covered meltdown. The wife shook her head in amazement. "How does someone get that disconnected from reality?" "Power," I said simply. "Even the smallest amount of power can corrupt if there's no accountability." Marcia started out probably wanting to keep the neighborhood nice, but somewhere along the way she stopped serving the community and started ruling it. The fake badges, the pretend patrol, it was all about feeling important, feeling in control. The husband nodded thoughtfully. "So the Sentinel wasn't really about protecting your mailbox?" "No," I agreed. "It was about drawing a line, saying this far and no further." Bullies count on people being too polite, too afraid, or too tired to fight back. As they headed back to unpacking, a car with an HOA sticker slowed as it passed the Sentinel. The new board did actual community service, now checking on elderly neighbors and organizing genuine programs. The driver waved, I waved back, and they continued on, giving the Sentinel a respectful distance. Peace had returned, but the Sentinel remained a 6-foot-tall reminder that sometimes the best way to stop a bully isn't with words or rules, it's with something they simply cannot break. In the end, the Sentinel became more than a mailbox or symbol. It became a story. People told a legend that spread beyond our Texas neighborhood. Every petty tyrant who heard the tale might think twice before putting on a fake badge. Every bullied homeowner might find courage to stand their ground. Some folks need a badge to feel powerful. Some need a title. Me, I just needed a post hole digger and a point to prove bullies come in all forms. Sometimes they even have flashing lights, but they all fall the same way. Hard. If this story of fake cops meeting real justice made your day, hit subscribe for more tales of everyday heroes who refuse to back down. What's your story of standing up to fake power drop?